Manasya vikala puman yati tat samyatam bhadre hiyalingo lingavaniva. Manasya vikala puman yati tat samyatam bhadre hiyalingo lingavaniva. Ladies, evam, in this, gunai, by the modes of material nature, brahmimane, when shaken, manasi, the mind, avikala, changeless, puman, the living entity, yati, approaches, tatsamyatam, the same condition of agitation as the mind. Bhadre, O my gentle mother, he, indeed, alinga, without a subtle or a gross body. Lingavan, possessing a material body. Eva, as if. Translation. In the same way, O my gentle mother, when the mind is agitated by the movements of the modes of material nature, the living entity, although freed from all different phases of the subtle and gross bodies, thinks that he is changed from one condition to another. So the in the same way is referring to because the movements of the water, the trees on the bank of the river, when reflected on the water, seem to move. Similarly, when the eyes move, because of some mental derangement, the land appears to move also. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1084:13, Yajatma Buddhi Kunapetri Datuke Svadi Kalatridishu Boma Ijati Yateta Buddhi Salile Na Kahichinch Janesh Abhigyasu Saeva Gokara. A human being who identifies the body made of three elements as the self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, who considers the land of his birth worshipable, and who goes to a place of pilgrimage simply to bathe rather than to meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is to be considered like a cow or an ass. So the three elements are kapha, pitta, and vata, which is mucus, bile, and air. Yeah. So if you ever do Ayurvedic medicine, the first thing they do is they find out what your constitution of your body is, and then they know what type of medicine to give you, and what type of food you should be eating, even what time you should do some exercise in the morning. Quite superior, isn't it? Than just, okay, what you want, antibiotic, antidepressant, everyone gets the same thing. Doesn't matter how fat you are, whether you don't sleep, doesn't matter whether you eat hot dogs all day, just take this tablet. Although Hiranyakashipu was a great demon, he was not as foolish as the population of the modern world. Hiranyakashipu had clear knowledge of the spirit soul and the subtle and gross bodies, but now we are so degraded that everyone, including the exalted scientists, philosophers, and other leaders, is under the bodily conception of life, which is condemned in the Shastras. Saeva Gokara. Such persons are nothing but cows and asses. Hiranyakashipu advised his family members that although the gross body of his brother Hiranyaksha was dead, and they were aggrieved because of this, they should not lament, for the great soul of Hiranyaksha, who had already attained his next destination. Atma, the spirit soul, is always unchanged. Abhikala Puman. So Krishna mentions that in the Gita. He says, because Arjuna is worried about killing or being killed. And Krishna says, well, if there's nothing after this, then what does it really matter? And if there is something after this, then what does it really matter? We are spirit souls, but when carried by mental activities, manodharma, we suffer from so-called material conditions of life. This generally happens to non-devotees. Harav abhaktasya kuto mahad guna. The non-devotees may possess exalted material qualities, but because they are foolish, they have no good qualifications. The designations of the conditioned soul in the material world are decorations of the dead body. The conditioned soul has no information of the spirit and its exalted existence beyond the effects of the material condition. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmanitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swavedantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaura Bhattarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchikalpatrubhischa Kripasindhuvyevacha Paditanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So we accept theoretically that we're not the body, but we see with Srila Prabhupada, he's coming to the last stages of his life, and he's able to implement their understanding. He's able to show everybody that he's completely aware that he's not the body. He's undisturbed at the approach of death. So here, Hiranyakashipu's relatives are upset that Hiranyaksha has been killed, and Hiranyakashipu is trying to get them to see the bigger picture, that the soul doesn't die, only the body dies, and we shouldn't identify with the body. So Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that Hiranyakashipu was a great demon, but he was not as foolish as the population of the modern world. So that's interesting that people may not be big demons, but because they are very foolish, then they're putting themselves in a very precarious situation. It's interesting because you would normally think, well, they're not bad people in general. They're okay. They're nice people. They're not demons. But because they're foolish, then they have less understanding of what's going on than the demons. So therefore they could get themselves into a lot of trouble, Just like they take a classroom down to the abattoir when the kids are 16, they take them down to the abattoir. Abattoir is where they kill the animals. So they take them when they're 16, the class goes down. And the teacher's logic is, well, if you're going to eat meat, then you should be making an informed decision. You should be saying, well, I'm okay with the whole process. This is the cow, and this is how it becomes that red thing on the shelf in Tesco's with the rosettes around it. That's where it comes from. And if you want to eat it, then that's fine, but at least you're making an informed decision. But because the people are foolish, then they don't associate the suffering and injustice that is going on with the food that they're purchasing. So that foolishness puts them in a very difficult situation. And unfortunately, people are born fools, and then if they're trained and educated, they gain some information. And then if they become dvija, which means twice born, first of all born in ignorance, and then you become twice born when you become initiated into spiritual life, when you become aware that there is karma, there is life after death, you're not the body, there is a creator, he is a person, and that's a second birth. So then you're a different person, you have a different identity, which is interesting, isn't it? You change. So the way you behave is based upon the information you've been given. And if the information changes, then the way you behave changes. Which is interesting, isn't it? In Spanish, educado means one who is has good character, who's well behaved. Educado. So it's not just an accumulation of information. How you conduct yourself. Actions speak louder than words. So that's the first point, that although Hiranyakashipu was a great demon, he was not as foolish as the population of the modern world. So Hiranyakashipu knew to some degree how the rules worked, and he was trying to work the system. So he knew that you couldn't get anywhere unless you performed austerity. He'd worked that one out. If you want to get somewhere in life, you need to perform austerity. So Hiranyakashipu had worked that one out. He also understood that there was a system in the universe, and that unless higher authorities are being pleased, then things won't work out nicely. So he was looking for benedictions from Brahma, the engineer of the universe. So he understood that there was an engineer of the universe. He didn't think it was a big bang. He didn't think we all just popped out of nowhere by accident. You know, the chance, you've heard of the chance theory? The theory of chance. It means nothing was planned or designed. Everything just kind of popped out of nowhere by accident. That's the law. That's the theory of chance. And there's a really nice book called Nature's IQ, and they're trying to figure out, well, if everything was by accident, there's one bird that's got a really long beak, and the female, as soon as the eggs have been laid, the female just flies away. So the male is there with his long beak, and what he does is he gets the eggs and he covers them with leaves and bits of sand and dust until there's like a big mound, and then with his long beak, he pops it in and he checks the temperature, and the temperature has to stay. It can only deviate by 1 or 2 degrees. If it's a couple of degrees too hot or a couple of degrees too low, then the eggs die or fry. One of the two. Anyway, they don't survive. So that's really very, very difficult to understand how that could have happened by accident, because it's so fine an arrangement. If he's evolving, and he's saying to the little chicks, "Look, I've only got a short beak right now, guys, but if you just hang on, in a few million years, the beak will be a lot longer, and I'll be able to do this a lot better. So just hang in there, I'll get you some thermal underwear from Tesco's. Just hang in there, boys." It's got to be spot on the very day those eggs are laid. Everything's got to be set up. The beak's got to be there. He's got to know about the right temperature. Don't know how he works out the right temperature from there. Whatever it is, it's all worked out beforehand. So only a very foolish person would think that they just kind of stumbled across it, and there it is. And what a stroke of good luck, because there's a lot of strokes of good luck going on if we look around. There's a lot of symbiotic relationships. The birds, there's the bees and the flowers. The bees cannot exist without flowers, and the flowers can't pollinate without bees. So if they did both evolve by accident, then they had to evolve on the same day. That's symbiotic. And there's this big orange fish. It's got this like massive mouth, and it lets these little blue fish come in and eat the bits of food from its teeth. So that helps the blue fish, and that helps the orange fish, because he doesn't have to go to the dentist as much. But what they're asking in the book, Nature's IQ, did they have a board meeting with all the fish? And the orange fish was there, and he was saying to the blue fish, "Don't worry, guys, I won't eat you, but the rest of you better watch out, because I will be eating you." So then all the blue fish passed a memo round, and when all the blue fish were born, the memo was, "We're okay with the orange one. Don't go for anything else, but the orange one, if he's got his mouth open, he'll be okay in there." How did that happen? So Hiranyakashipu wasn't so foolish, and therefore he understood there was some system, and he just worked out how to work the system. And he did do quite well. I mean, he did a lot better than most demons do, or even foolish innocent people. He had things so that his body wasn't growing old. He was living for a very long time. He was getting all the enjoyment and opulence that he wanted. So he nearly worked it out completely. But there was one thing that he didn't get right, and that was that no matter how hard you try, you can't be God. Because God was always God, and you were always not God. And you can't become God and push God off the pedestal and say, I'm taking over. Beat it. Which seems foolish to us, but when you have that amount of power, then maybe you can convince yourself. And that's what it's interesting, actually, in the 16th chapter, Krishna's analyzing the demoniac nature. He says, I have killed him, and he is my enemy. I will kill him in the future. So the way a demon works is he proves that he is God because he goes around killing other people. He thinks, well, where was God then? I just killed them. I just dropped a bomb on 1 million people. They're all dead. Where was God then? Therefore, whoever he is, he can't be as powerful as me because he's not stopping me from killing people. In this way, the demon becomes more and more convinced that if he does run up against God, he'll just kill him as well. So that's how the demoniac nature works. They exert their superiority over others, and the more they can do it, the more they feel established. So Saeva Gokara, such persons are nothing but cows and asses. So Prabhupada's referring there to just the general people who are foolish, including exalted scientists, philosophers and leaders, because they're all under the bodily conception of life. So Hiranyakashipu advised his family members that although the gross body of his brother Hiranyaksha was dead, and they were aggrieved because of this, they should not lament for the great soul of Hiranyaksha, who had already attained his next destination. Atma, the spirit soul, is carried by mental activities, manodharma. We suffer from so-called material conditions of life. This generally happens to non-devotees. Harav abhaktashukuto mahadguna. Non-devotees may possess exalted material qualities, but because they are foolish, they have no good qualifications. So that ruins everything. That ruins everything. If you're a fool, then all the good qualities that you may possess are ruined. And the opposite of a fool in Sanskrit is called dhira. Dhira. Dhira means one who's sober. So a foolish person is whimsical, and the opposite of a foolish person is someone who's sober, very grave, weighs things up. So is the educational system producing dhira, or is it just producing fools, foolish people that do get themselves into very foolish situations? So then the educational system is failing because this discipline is something which needs to be taught. And if the young are encouraged to be undisciplined, that this is some kind of liberation, then it's difficult. They're not accountable, they're not dependable, they can't commit. They just want to float around like clouds and not be held accountable. So this is not good. The designations of the conditioned soul in the material world are decorations of the dead body. So the body is dead, and Prabhupada refers to the body, the dead body is flapping for a few years, flapping in the wind. So if you look at a flag when it's not windy, it's just lying there dead. And then if you blow it, get the wind going on it, then the flag suddenly comes alive and it's flapping about. And so you could think, oh, look at him over there. He's a really lively character. He's been flapping about. He's got an amazing pair of trousers on, and he looks like he's really going places. He's flapping about like anything. Let's go and hang out with him. He seems to know what it's all about. But he's actually just a dead flag flapping in the wind for a few years, and then the wind dies down, and the flag flops, and that was the end of that. So it's a dead body, and then the dead body is decorated. In fact, that's what they do. You know, when a person dies, I had a friend he was going around the businesses, and he went to a funeral director, And when the funeral director went behind the counter to get a donation for him, he had a quick peep behind the curtain, and there was a dead body. But he didn't look very happy. He was like, looked like he'd just seen the Yamadutas. So when he's ready for the funeral, what they do is they'll push his jaw back in, push his eyes in, and then they put this rouge on his cheeks. And then when everyone's looking, thinking, well, at least he died peacefully. But it's just decorations on a dead body. So similarly, you may put some nice lipstick on and wear one of those corsets and stand, there's this funny video of this man, he's like this, and he's on the beach, and this pretty lady goes past him, he goes like that. And you wouldn't think he had a belly then, but when she's gone past, he lets it go, and it knocks the table over with all the glasses and stuff on it. So people are trying to make themselves look good, make themselves smell good, because the dead body doesn't smell so good. And although you could say, well, my body's not dead, I'm still alive, it's definitely in a state of decomposition. It's decomposing before your very eyes. And so what they do, they get the skin and they tighten it up here. It's called a facelift. And eventually, they keep tightening it. And that way all the skin, all the sag goes up and it makes you look young again, But eventually you end up with a dimple here. You know what that is? Your belly button. That's when they pulled it up too far. So you're in this bag, this smelly bag that's decomposing, and you're trying to fight to establish. So it would be a lot easier just to be relieved of the mistake that you're the body, and to understand it's such a relief to realize that you're not the body, because then you don't have to be embarrassed by the body anymore. It's just a vehicle that you're going around in. And if somebody likes you just because of your body, then they don't really like you. But if somebody likes you because of who you are, then they really like you. Then you can have a real relationship with somebody. The conditioned soul has no information of the spirit and its exalted existence beyond the effects of the material condition. So that's the first thing, is we need information. We may not be aware that we're not the body, but at least we need the information. First of all, we get the information that we're not the body, and then we start trying to assimilate that. Okay, well, what would that feel like if I was aware that I wasn't the body and I'm in the body? How would I behave? What would be my outlook on life? How would that change things? So first of all, the information and its exalted existence beyond the effects of the material condition. So the body right now, we're heavily compromised by the body. And if we can get free from the body, all the problems are due to the body. Any problems that you have in life are because of the body. If you're not the body, then that gets rid of all the problems in one go. There's no problems anymore. Don't have to worry about being fat or getting old or having this problem or that problem. All those problems are the body. So if you're aware that you're not the body, then you're relieved of all those problems. So the real problem is the false ego. The false ego is identifying us with our body, and then we're identifying other people with their bodies. So the false ego makes us see people in a certain way and see ourselves in a certain way. So if we get free of the false ego, then we're relieved of all that. And then we're aware of the exalted existence of the soul. That the soul has no beginning and has no end. It's eternal, it's blissful, it's full of knowledge. This is the soul. This is who we really are. And right now we're in a compromised, heavily compromised condition. And we're not realizing our real potential, what we can actually do. How happy we can actually be. It's inconceivable how happy we can actually be. If we're aware that we're eternal, we're full of bliss and full of knowledge, that's a very happy situation to be in. And we should try for that. People are trying really hard for temporary happiness. The man works all his life, he gets the house, He's 66 and a half, he's retired, and now there he is in his house, and then suddenly he realizes, oh, although this house has got very thick brick walls, I'm still getting older and I'm still going to die. So it's not really going to solve the situation. All I have now is the comfort of knowing that I'm dying in a house that I own, as opposed to a house that I rent, which is a very little consolation, really, isn't it? I'm sorry to tell you, Mr. Jenkins, I know you've just retired, but I'm afraid I've got to tell you, Mr. Jenkins, you've only got 3 months left to live. But there is one good thing, Mr. Jenkins. What's that? At least you're going to die in a house that you own. I mean, what comfort is that? It's such a waste. And then your kids will get the house and they'll just trash it because they don't know what hard work is, because they didn't learn it. If you don't work hard for something, you don't appreciate its value. So everything is just such a waste. It doesn't help the kids. They're going to grow old and die as well. And on that cheery note, any questions or comments? Yes, Pip. Well, there's a conversation with Srila Prabhupada and Govinda Dasi. Prabhupada is saying, why are these birds flying over here? And Govinda Dasi says, it's instinct. And he says, what does that mean? And she doesn't know what it means. It's just a fancy word that they use when they don't understand what something means. So he said, it's the super soul. It's the Paramatma in their heart, just directing them. So what we call, or what they call instinct, is actually a subconscious dialogue taking place with a higher intelligence inside you that's directing your conscious. Although you're not directly aware of what's going on, you know that you need to fly in that direction because of the Paramatma inside the heart. And it's interesting that the super soul, the Lord's expansion in the heart, will communicate with an animal or even with a demon. Like Kamsa was weighing up the pros and cons of killing Devaki when she was pregnant. He was thinking, I'll just kill her now, and then that solves the problem of the kid that's going to kill me. But as he was trying to do it, the Paramatma in his heart was saying, but you can't do that, you know. I mean, it's your sister and she's pregnant. That's outrageous. How can you do such a thing? You're going to have to wait. So there's this whole conflict going on, and he couldn't just go and do it because the Paramatma was checking him. So in the same way, we may think that we have full control to do whatever we like, and we may do some horrendous act. There's so many cases of people that did really horrendous acts, and then straight after they did it, the super soul was really chastising them, and then they just killed themselves. And they hadn't factored that in. They were thinking, I'll do that, and I'll get a machine gun, and then I'll go off and get an ice cream and watch a film, you know. But they didn't plan that after they did it, this voice inside them would be saying, why did you do that? That is so bad. That is, you don't deserve to exist after that. And so they finished themselves off. So it would be better to try and connect consciously with the dialogue that's taking place, that there is a dialogue going on. The Lord is there in the heart, and He's directing you, He's giving you the intelligence, He's helping you to plan for the future. He's trying to, He's really on your side. So it would be great to turn around and acknowledge Him and say, well, you know better than I do. What do you think I should do? And then be guided by the super soul. Well, you'd have to. So the question is, how do we recognize we may have demoniac traits? Which demoniac means that we're opposed to what God wants, God's system. We want to act independently of that, against that. Whereas if you're a demigod, you may like to enjoy yourself, but you accept your humble position as servant of Krishna, or servant of God anyway. So it may not. I remember my friend, actually, we were in the graveyard and we were intoxicated at the time. And he climbed up onto a gravestone and he made an announcement. He said, "I am God." And so we were kind of thinking, well, if he is, then we must all be, because he's no better than any of us. So due to a lack of information, I mean, ignorance is the real problem, actually. The ignorance, you may think that ignorance isn't so bad, it's just a question of not being aware of the facts. But ignorance, Shishiko Nitai Maya Pashashiki Jai. Krishna says, besides these qualities, whatever there is ignorance. He talks about humility and pridelessness and the perception of the evil of birth and death, and freedom from attachment to family, wife, home, and the rest. Besides these, wherever there may be, is ignorance. And ignore, sin means to separate ourselves from God. So ignore means to turn your back on somebody. So it's actually quite a antagonistic attitude to have, that you're just going to take shelter of ignorance. You're going to ignore the consequences, the ramifications, the advice of elders and more learned and wise, and you don't care. I'm just going to do this. So, and because it's a process, ignorance is a process. It may start off with small things, and then eventually it ends up being, heavy things where you're killing people. It starts off seemingly not much different than somebody that's not in ignorance, but then as you carry it through, it progresses into more and more developed stages. So better to nip it in the bud. It's a little bit like gardening, actually, because when you're gardening, I made the mistake one year of leaving all the weeds in and pulling all the... I worked out, actually, if it's a weed, it's really hard to pull out. And if it comes out really easy, it's probably a plant. So I started putting them back in after a while. That one came out pretty easy, put it back in. So the problem with weeds is they don't, they seem okay. They're like, look, I'm all right. Look at these leaves. I've got nice leaves. Everything's going to be fine, and you leave it. And then it eventually grows into this really ugly thing. And there's no real nice flowers on it. And it inconveniences all the other plants, takes all the nourishment. So with demoniac tendencies, it's good to recognize them when they're just in their seedling form. They're just starting to sprout, and you realize, oh, I know what this is going to lead to. But that would need knowledge, it would need discrimination, and a certain amount of introspection to think, this is not good, this attitude's bad, this is going to lead to this, which will lead to this, which will lead to this. Let me just pull it out now before it develops, becomes full-blown. And that's what our process is. Our process of meditation is to recognize these tendencies in their beginning stages and pull them out. Because once they become established, then it becomes very difficult to pull them out. So that means vigilance as well. You can't slacken off. You only have to leave the weeds for a week, come back, and the whole place is, I've lost my strawberry patches because I didn't keep an eye on it. I went out one day and weeded them all. Thought, well, they'll be fine now for a month or two. Came out next week, couldn't find the strawberries. These tiny little strawberries this year because the weeds had sucked all the goodness out. And now I'm just going to have to redo the whole thing, So you need to be vigilant to constantly introspecting and looking and seeing, okay, that's not good. Let's get rid of that. I'm getting better. This is getting better, but this is still, I still need to work on this, And if you're married, then you need a very patient wife. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Pep. Pep Pancha. Yeah. Well, the subtle body is there's quite a lot of things going on in there. If you have a bag called the subtle body and you looked inside that bag, there's a lot of stuff. There's the subconscious, which is part of the subtle body. So the subconscious has an aversion or an affinity for something, although you're not consciously aware why you're attracted to a horse and carriage. But it was because in your past life you had a horse and carriage and you were really fond of it. So now when you see a horse and carriage, you go, wow. But you're not consciously aware why that is. But subconsciously you're aware. Because they say if you're going down a road at 30 miles an hour looking at the back of the driver's head and you're asked afterwards, what could you see? You'll say the back of the driver's head. But if they say, we're going to hypnotize you now and take you down the road again at 3 miles an hour. And at 3 miles an hour, you can say, we're going past number 22. They've got pink curtains in the window. The gate is green. And the cat looking through the window has got a blue collar on it. Now we're on to number 24. The gate's broken. They've got a dog called Fido. And she's got a picture on the wall I can see through the window. So the subconscious mind is taking everything in, but the conscious mind can't cope with the amount of information that's there. So it just gets filtered out, and you just deal with the back of the driver's head. Your peripheral vision is taking everything in. And the subtle body doesn't forget anything, although the conscious, trying to connect with all those memories and thoughts and experiences, sometimes doesn't manage it. But it's all there. Everything, like a sponge, it just soaks everything up. And then what you can actually cope with is just a very small amount of information, just a very little bit of what's going on. What the false ego becomes reduced through the Srila Prabhupada said the sound vibration of the Maha Mantra dissolves the ego, the false ego. You become more aware of who you really are. So you shed off these coverings. You become aware that you're not. It's a very simple process, really, because if you're glued to something, and the thing you're glued to is very unpleasant, and you're trying to sort this unpleasant thing out that you're glued to, it's going to be a very long process, especially if the thing you're glued to just keeps getting bigger and bigger with every lifetime. Every lifetime, there's another lifetime of mistakes and misconceptions glued into it. And this is just getting bigger and bigger and more and more difficult to deal with. And then suddenly someone just dissolves the glue. And, oh, I've got nothing to do with that. Well, that's really good. Okay. And then you can proceed on unfettered by the material energy. And the process of devotional services, it brings auspiciousness in the beginning, the very beginning stages, explains in Nectar of Devotion, you're feeling very auspicious and you're feeling lighter and freer because you're starting to shed off now all this misidentification. Yeah. 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 And if you're just acting foolishly, whimsically, and not with sober consideration, then you're perpetuating. You're not disentangling, you're perpetuating. So our process is we pull the plug out the fan, and then the fan will start to slow down, and then we patiently wait for the day when the fan stops. But the fact that we can feel the fan slowing down is encouraging, because we're realizing, wow, a few years ago, if I'd have been offered that, I wouldn't have even thought. I just grabbed it. And now I'm like weighing it up, Okay, the girl looks really pretty, but she won't look really pretty in 50 years. And now I'm thinking like that. It's temporary. It's a temporary thing. Why should I fall for that illusion? So you become more dhira, more sober. Vikriditam Rajavadabe idam to Vishnu, Shradan Vito Nishunayad Atavanayadya, Bhaktam Param Bhagavati Patilapya Kaman, Hidrogam Ajvapa Hinoti Acharena Dhira. Then you become sober, because you're hearing about Krishna and your consciousness is becoming purified. And so then you become free from hridrogam, which is a disease of lust that's in the heart. The heart is, you have heart disease, and that disease is lust. And as you're practicing spiritual life, the disease starts to go away. You don't have heart disease anymore, hridrogam. And then you start to become sober, and you lose attraction. You just lose attraction because you understand what the real thing is. You understand this is just a perverted reflection, and this is the real thing. The real thing. Once you get the real thing, why would you be interested in accumulating counterfeit money anymore? The money looks like money, but you can't purchase anything with it. Like some people, when you're playing Monopoly, they get really uptight. Really uptight. I remember when I was, because Shangi's my uncle, we used to play Monopoly a lot. We used to get like almost fisticuffs, and all he had was a load of paper notes, and he used to win quite a lot. I used to get miffed, But it's counterfeit money. You can't take Monopoly down the road and go and buy something from the news stations. He'll chase you. So in the same way, this is counterfeit. What we're trying to purchase in the material world is counterfeit of what's there with Krishna. The original Adi Ras is Krishna and his enjoyment. So as we become purified, we become more aware this isn't real. This is just kind of a really, really low-grade imitation, and you don't get what you want to purchase. You get the currency. It seems like it's the real currency. Whereas once you get something real, then why would you want anything false anymore? That's what realization is, isn't it? To realize is to make it real. We accept that Krishna is God and that his enjoyment is the best, and serving him and assisting him in his enjoyment is going to be the best satisfaction for us. But we haven't realized it. We want to make that real, We can accept it theoretically, but the challenge is, can you make it real? Any other questions or comments? Hare Krishna. Well, the body is a problem because it gives pain, and it causes forgetfulness, and then we're connected to the body through the subtle body, and then there are problems there as well, subtle problems, mental problems, and then the real problem is the false ego. The false ego is the real problem. You're sitting there chanting your japa, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Everything's going well, and then the false ego pops up and says, "Do you remember the way he looked at you yesterday when he was serving you the halava? You shouldn't stand for that. He's only been a devotee for 3 days. Who does he think he is?" Then the false ego says to the intelligence, we need to do some kind of a plan here. We need to work something out, to get our own back on him, So then the intelligence starts coming in and scheming. Then the mind's like, what's happening, guys? What are we doing? We're thinking of a plan of how to get our own back. Oh, okay. And then the mind just goes along. Mind's in the mode of goodness, so we'll just comply. The intelligence is in the mode of passion, so it's always scheming, trying to create things and design things and figure things out. If he says this, I'll do that. And if he does that, then I'll do this. And then the false ego is in the mode of ignorance. So the false ego causes all the other problems, So if you can eliminate the false ego, if you can Trinada Pisa Nietzsche, Tarada Pisa Hishna, if you can chant humbly and not looking for any type of respect, then you can chant properly. And there's no difference between chanting properly and chanting constantly, because when you're chanting properly, you won't want to stop. So you'll automatically be chanting constantly when you're chanting properly. Jai. Yes, Kangarinda ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Gaura Premanandi Haribo. All of you ki.